I'm John Evans. Welcome to another episode of One-on-One. Dr. Charles Foust is the new superintendent for New Hanover County Schools, and he arrived at one of the most turbulent times in the school district's history. Not only is there the COVID-19 pandemic, which is creating challenges for students and families and teachers and staff members at every school in the county, but there's also the sex abuse scandal. In the past 3 years, 3 educators arrested and charged with sex crimes against students. And there's a current SBI investigation into whether administrators violated any laws regarding allegations brought to their attention. Dr. Foust arrives here from the Kansas City, Kansas public school system with a clean slate, coming back to his native state of North Carolina, and he's now the first black superintendent hired for New Hanover County Schools. I asked Dr. Charles Foust how he plans to address the challenges that lie ahead in and out of the classroom. Dr. Charles Foust, the brand new superintendent for New Hanover County Schools, welcome to the One-on-One with John Evans podcast, sir.
Thank you for having me.
You've been on the job now 2 weeks officially.
Right. Yes.
Give me your thoughts on how the teachers and the staff are handling the situation with the pandemic and remote learning this year with a little time to prepare for it rather than when it was tossed on them in March of this year.
So I can say, let me start with just being thankful that, we have professionals as such. Our teachers are teaching the curriculum as it's written, and they're doing a phenomenal job with having, students virtually or remotely is what we call it here, having them at a remote distance and just prescribing the lessons to them. So just thankful for what the work that they're doing, and teachers along with the principals who are making sure that kids are getting the needed education that we have.
Now let's conversely talk about the families. How are the students and the families dealing with it? It seems to me that the students are going to push through it. Sometimes the families are the ones that are worried about them. How are they doing?
Absolutely. So, we have mixed reviews. We have those who are not a fan of coming back to school right now, and we have those who are saying, please, we need our kids back in school. We aren't getting the quality education that we are accustomed to by being virtual, and we need more time on task, and we can do that face-to-face versus the remote learning, because as you know, we can't put a student in front of a computer for 6 hours nonstop. We're in a classroom, you're going to be teaching, 90 minutes, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, or whatsoever to actually get the lesson through. And so the lesson is a little spotty, chopped up, and we're gonna have to do some reteaching. So again, it's mixed reviews, but we are wanting to make sure that first and foremost students and employees are safe.
I don't know how you think of it, but to me, it would seem like the ones to worry the most about are kindergarten, first, second, and third graders learning remotely. I think as they get older, kids can learn remotely, but those young ones and the social adaptation that takes part in their early years, are they the ones you're the most worried about?
Well, actually, I'm worried about all. And the reason why I say all is that our district was not set up for one-to-one devices. So not having that prescribed curriculum for one-to-one and going from teacher to facilitator, even at the upper grade. So it's a worry for all, but yes, you do have a worry at the foundational years, trying to make sure that students are learning to read, learning the one-to-one correspondence with math, and small group instruction. Although at the high school and those courses that may require, like the AP courses, your honors courses, and all of the reading and that rich discussion that you would typically get, you're not going to get that through a virtual context. So there's a worry at all levels for us, because we know that we've got to get set up to bring our students back, but we've got to bring them back safely. And so we're working to that and working towards it. And that's what we were talking about earlier today at a principals meeting.
In an earlier interview, I heard you say the pandemic does provide an opportunity for the achievement gap to widen.
Absolutely.
How do you close that?
So I was just speaking again with our principals, and so we have to break it down through subgroups. And so that's so everyone will see, you look at it and you'll look at, okay, whether it's reading, math, science, social studies, wherever, but we have to look at subgroups. And so the goal would be to increase or grow students 10 percentage points each year. And so the subgroup would grow 10 percentage points from where they are. And so we look at that, and that would be a minimum of 10 percentage points. But then what happens is some will do 10%, some are going to do actually 40 percentage points. But then there's a physics theory that says the Pareto principle, or physics principle, that's the Pareto principle, that the few account for the many. So we're going to get those that are at 60% that actually are able to close that gap, and then you'll have those that hit just 10%, and so it'll balance out, and so that's how we'll start to close that achievement gap. But you're right, we had a couple years of Florence with students, so that kind of extended, and so now we have this. So yes, it is extending. The great part about it is that we've only been in school about three and a half weeks. Mm-hmm. I know that if we go back and we look at March, but there was instruction that took place prior to us closing face-to-face. Right. So I think we can recap on those lessons, and then we can start with looking at subgroups and giving them the data at looking at closing it and adding 10 percentage points each for each subgroup.
These are, needless to say, Dr. Foust, some turbulent times for the New Hanover County Schools. How much of the recent sex abuse charges and the scandal and everything that went with it, how much of that did you hear about during the process of applying for this job? And then how much did you learn about during the interview process, and then maybe when they offered you the job? Were you told about it? Did you know about it?
I did. So I, of course, did my own research when I was told that there was a position open here in New Hanover County. But that wasn't my first thing to look at. I looked at the district as a whole.
Understand.
See, what's the district doing, and what are the positive things that's going on in the district? And then I did want to know, well, how did this happen? And of course, everyone has their own saying of what happened, and that's not literally what we're trying to find out. We want to make sure now that it doesn't happen again. So yes, I was aware of the things. Of course, I read the news articles, all of the op-eds, read those too. And so, the thing that's really good is that I understand. Well, I know I've been trained in Title IX and Title VI, so I know what should happen and where we can help support our families, our employees, our communities, to make sure that this doesn't happen again under the same guise. I'm not going to say that there aren't some predators out there that will not attempt it, but we need to know what is the process that we will use in the event that there is a Title I issue, not Title I, I'm sorry, Title IX issue that takes place.
Did it in any way cause you to back off a little bit or to have second thoughts about it during any part in the process?
It didn't. It did not. What I do know is that there's some great employees here in the district. And although there were, a couple who were not following the policy and did what they were supposed to do, but there are so many more that were doing what they were supposed to do. So I looked at that light and said, that's where I want to be. I want to be with the individuals who actually want to learn, those individuals who understand that, wrong is wrong. And so we can do it. But that did not bring pause to me at any time.
Who did you talk about this job during the process? And what did they tell you about New Hanover County Schools? Maybe somebody that's not involved here, but you called up and said, hey, what about that New Hanover County, Wilmington, North Carolina job? And what did they tell you?
So the great part is I am a North Carolinian.
Right, I knew that. That's coming up here a little bit.
And so I was able to go back and do some research. And then, yes, had a mentor who had actually the one who had shared with me that the position was open. And we had some very detailed conversations about what was going on in the positive. And then we did address some things that were negative. And, I think for one thing that we have to understand and let people know that if you see something, say something. And so that's where I've always gone from that lens of it's not our job to say if they're guilty or not. We're supposed to report it and allow the chips to fall where they may. And we continue with instructing and making sure that children are safe. So there was conversation about it, but we didn't harp on just that, because I know that we are better than what actually happened. And when I say that as a district, as a community, we're better than that. And again, like I said, that was just one small token, but it was a big token. I do not want to minimize any of it because it was very serious of what happened. But I do believe that, and when I shared, when I talked with my mentor at that time, the great things that can happen and the things that I know what to do and how to help individuals overcome this was actually right in my wheelhouse.
Now, you grew up outside of Greensboro.
I did.
Neither one of your parents were in education. And so when did teaching and education come on your radar? I guess your father was a truck driver, if I'm not if I'm correct?
Yes,
so
you're correct.
When did teaching and education come on Charles's radar growing up?
So probably around about fourth grade. My sister was a student here at UNCW. She was here, she played volleyball. And so we knew that college was always an option for the three of us. Our parents always instilled education in us. And so sitting at the table with my mom and how she would always instruct me of doing homework, I knew there had to be a better way. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like trial by fire. And so, but I learned, that's the thing, I did learn. And so I would get to school and oftentimes I would see things and I would ask questions or it would just translate different to me when a teacher would put a problem up or we would do something, I would have a different approach to it. And they were always like, well, you see it differently and how do you do that? And so things just came easy for me in there. And so it was like, hey, and then I started tutoring students. So it was at a younger age when I would start to help students in class or, after school and doing some tutoring with younger cousins and things. So teaching, I guess that would have been the non-standard way of teaching, but it was always approaching. So when I went to high school, I was in Future Teachers of America.
Okay.
And we would go to the Sedalia Elementary actually and tutor once a month and I had a group of third graders there that I would work with for a couple hours. And it was that was there. I thought I was going to be an attorney. But education actually kind of had a stronger pull.
Now, I know you started in the Guilford County school system, but your first education-related job, quote unquote, was driving a school bus, right?
Yeah, yes. So I got the opportunity because, of course, my dad was strong on driving and told me that, I could be a truck driver and make a lot of money. I just didn't want to be a truck driver. No offense to any truck driver. I don't like driving over 5 hours. So I knew that wasn't the job for me. And so while I was in college, one year, I think it was my sophomore year, they were hiring, it was like maybe $12 an hour. And somehow it's like my schedule worked that year. So it was like, you don't, as a college student, you're not having classes at 7:30 in the morning. So I had an elementary run and then it was a middle school run. So I was done with my bus route probably like 8:15 and classes started for me at 10. And so, you have those breaks. And so I would go get my students and, making $900 a month as a college student, hey, that was great. It just didn't work out for me the next school year. So I had to leave that and then, go back to doing something else.
Now, if there's anything that's going to prepare you for a teaching job, it's driving a school bus.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. Wow. The lessons that I learned on the school bus. Wow. We'll have to talk about that offline.
But at that point in time, did it give you a different perspective, though? Because I would think that getting students when they're in a classroom, and you said you did some tutoring, and that's when they're education minded. But in the
Yes.
school bus before school, it's, they're all over the place. So I imagine it may have been a different perspective on youth introduced to you then.
Yes, it actually afforded me the opportunity, which I didn't realize it then. I was more so interested in, of course, driving, being safe, but the paycheck at the end of the month. But what I didn't realize is being the inspiration to some of the students on the bus for the routes that I was riding. It was, I had a rough neighborhood that I was driving for, and they had not seen an individual. It was like, what are you doing? You're in college. What are you doing? And then being able to have a conversation with, I learned from other bus drivers about what you do with students, how do you get them to be quiet, how do you get them to do, so they actually taught me, and then having that discourse between routes, that was the funniest part, is like you get on a bus and you just converse with other bus drivers and they're like, oh, and they were encouraging me to continue in school. It's like, hey, look out for us. Once you make it big, look out for us. Of course, that was in 1993. Hopefully they're not still driving. I hope they're all retired from that now, but they actually taught and inspired me. And just, even though I was on the bus with students and, having conversations with them and, talking to them about what they wanted to do in life and how to get there. And that was, again, just an opportunity for me to share with the community, the students, and again, like I said, just have fun with students. But I didn't realize that I was a college student, didn't realize that the bus drivers were pouring into me and I was pouring into students. I did not realize that.
And you graduated from North Carolina A&T University. You started on your master's degree at UNC. Later on, you finished it in Houston at the prodding of your daughters, I understand. But what happened to Chapel Hill that separated you from being able to finish it there?
So two things. So I finished the master's degree at Chapel Hill. I started my doctoral work.
My fault.
So doctoral work at Chapel Hill. So I was recruited to go to Houston.
Okay.
In 2010, and I was almost gotten there to the, of course, I'd written the first 3 chapters of the dissertation, so I was ready to defend my proposal. And I had to make a decision. I was asked to take a school over that the state was actually gonna take, or they were either gonna make them close the school, rename it, reconstitute, that type of thing. And I said, hey, I can do this. I've always wanted to do that type of work at that time. And I wasn't at a school of that nature in Guilford County. So I took that, left Chapel Hill, went there and, did the hard work and, met a lot of great people there. Thought I was going to be able to do some distance learning at Chapel Hill. Yeah, that wasn't going to work. And so I was like, oh, what do I need? I'm good. I don't need this doctoral degree. And my daughter and I was taking her to school. And at that point I was supervising principals at that time. And so we were going to school, and I'll never forget, she was in the backseat. We were on Highway 288. And she said, have you ever quit anything? And I was like, no, I've never quit. And I don't know where out of the blue she just started talking about quitting. I was like, no, I've never quit anything. Like, I finished what I started. She said, what about your doctoral degree? I was like, oh. I said, well, it's on hold. I didn't actually quit. It's on hold. She said, well, when are you going to finish? And so at that point,
mouths of babes.
Absolutely. So after that conversation, it was probably a couple months where I then enrolled at the University of Houston and had things transferred over and was able to finish the degree at the University of Houston. And now I ask her, it's like, hey, we're ready for school and there's no quitting for school. So thankful
That's That's a
Yeah.
great story that she would ask you that and it would pop up like that. You went to the Kansas City, Kansas public school system in, I guess, 2018. And
Yes.
in the first year, there was double-digit growth in student achievement, increases in math and reading across all populations. A year later, October 2019, it was no longer the lowest performing district in the state. What did you see that you latched onto that you knew there was opportunity for growth there?
So that's the beauty of that is what I even say it here. Kids come to school to learn. They do. They come to school to learn, and as adults, we sometimes afford excuses that they come from a different neighborhood, they don't have the support at home. And so I say that sometimes we diminish the role as an educator by saying that because we have them for 6 hours throughout the day. So what can we get done in 6 hours with a student? Regardless of what the home life is, we can handle that. We have social workers, we have counselors, and of course, teachers who and principals who deal with that. But what do we do when we have them? And so we took that approach and looked at data, looked at a lot of data, looked at the instructional practices. I did a lot of training with teachers, a lot of professional development with not with teachers, I did it with principals, and it trickled down to teachers, and we set the goal. And I honestly believe, and when I first started my dissertation, I was talking with students about what type of teacher do you like? And so they were talking about, basically what came out is that people like to know what the rules are. And if there are no rules, they make up their own. But if you give them a rule, they'll follow the rule as long as you hold them accountable. So I took that into the approach with working with teachers and principals and said, okay, what are you accountable? These are the accountability measures. This is what we're accountable for. And we set what we call bite-sized goals. And those bite-sized goals became actually mouthful. And when we saw kids growing at the beginning and teachers like, oh my gosh, this child actually can learn. And so it became a data-rich, data-friendly environment with them there. And so that's how it started. All I did was introduce it to the schools, and they took it and ran with it. I'll just say I was the catalyst, but they were the ones who did the work. So that's how it happened. And in that next year, they became more hungry. And so instead of I was setting the goals like here at 10% as a minimum. They're like, no, we can't do 10%. We've got to do at least 20. And so we had schools that were hitting 30 to 35 percentage points in growth, which was amazing.
Yeah, I saw as I was reading again doing the research, 43 schools in the district, 39 showed positive gains in English and language arts in that first year. That's a pretty
Yes.
impressive number. One of the things that I also found extremely interesting, and I want you to tell me more about this, was that administrators there, you included, knocked on doors to get students who were maybe on a dropout list, who were not that far away from actually completing their degrees. To see a superintendent actually get out in the community and is Joey there? Joey needs 2 more classes. What were you trying to show there?
That it's all hands on deck and that education is possible. So, of course, they won't see the data until later this year to see how many of that graduation rate, but it was literally, there were students who were 2 classes away from graduating. And so what we were doing to look at is that, okay, how do we increase the graduation rate? And what's going on with these students? So we had all principals, counselors at the high school pull those, and we just started looking at it, and we said, okay, we'll design it. And on this Saturday, there were board members, there was myself, there were senior staff, some teachers. We said we're going out into the community. So we divided up that list, and we literally just would park the car and start knocking on doors and telling them this is what it is. And so we would have a counselor with us and say, okay, here's the card, you can enroll on Monday. We had a packet for them showing them how to enroll, what was needed for them. And so we were trying to get the students back in school for them to finish their diploma.
When they answered the door, what kind of reaction did you see? Was it like who are you? Or were
Yes.
they appreciative of actually somebody showing interest in them? That's what I would hope that you would see.
Yeah, it was both. It's like, well, who are you? It's like, you're the superintendent. I'm like, yes, yes, we're here. And I was calling. The great part has been we had the picture of the student, and so I was able to talk to the student when they opened the door. I was asking for the student and talking to them, or talking to mom, dad, aunt, uncle, whomever. In some cases, it was grandma, who would answer that door and tell them what they needed, and we were breaking down their transcript for them. And that's what we were able to see. Is like, hey, you need 27 credit hours and you have 25. You're there. Or you need 27 and you have 22. Come back. We can do this. And yeah, that was great. Getting them, and it
So,
was.
sometimes the expression on the face is worth so much. I tell people, New Hanover County Schools has something called Best Foot Forward. It's the arts celebrated, where kids get up and they celebrate, and schools put together different performances, and they do it in front of several thousand people. And I've been blessed to be able to MC that for many years. It didn't happen this year because of the pandemic. And I tell people, it's an undescribable image that you see, especially the youngest kids, when they're up there and they're performing and they're doing their best, and then they stop, and there's that millisecond in between when they stop and the audience gives feedback. That millisecond image on their faces is the most precious thing I've ever seen, because did they like it? And then the audience comes back with the applause, and then it just blossoms. And I would hope, and correct me, did you see a lot of that when you were knocking on those doors?
We did. And the great part is when the adults were there. It's like, I told you, all you had to do was do X, and now you've got to do it because the superintendent is here, or the board member and the superintendent is here, because that's what it was about. It was, one, showing the community that we are all in, and that we care. And so there was a slogan there, on track, and so we were giving them little track shoes as we would go, and a baton to say, in order for you to run the race, you've got to have the baton. And so we were doing those things to help the students and help our community. But it was great. The response that we got, our principals, no one had ever done it before.
Right.
But the goal was, how do we get students back in school to finish school?
Yeah.
And so if it came down to, as I said, knocking on doors, that's what we did.
You were only there in Kansas City for 2 years. I have read some articles that have criticized you for leaving after 2 years. Is that fair?
Those are what I call their personal opinions. So to them, that would be fair. They can be fair. In the role of a leader, you have to take all the daggers with the praise. Mm-hmm. And so I understand. Some were like, why you deserted us? Like, well, we had a plan. There's a plan in place, and they're still able to execute that plan. Those individuals who are sitting at the table on the senior staff, they know exactly what to do. So it's not that they were deserted. And, I was there up until 2 weeks ago, still behind the scenes leading as they were doing the transition plan. So we were rocking and rolling. And I've shared with them, at any given point, if you need to text, call, I'm here. I know what turnaround work takes, mm-hmm. and I know what it takes out of you. Yeah. So I understand it.
You are young, relatively, for a superintendent. I guess the average age for the Superintendents Association between 54 and 55, and you're middle to late 40s. You're also one of very few black superintendents across the country. Do you embrace the role of being a role model for young African American students here and everywhere you've been?
So I embrace the model of just being an educator first. And I do put out there and tell everyone, look at me, it was not that I had parents with formal degrees. I didn't have someone who knew someone who knew someone. I didn't grow up with that. So anything that is worth having is worth working for. And so I go back to, I had an advisor in college, and his name, I think, was Tom Smith. And he told me, he said, it's not about how smart you are, Charles. It's about how hard are you willing to work for it. And so when I would do things, it's like, yeah, academically, I can roll with the best of them, but that's not going to change. That's not going to get people. It's about the work ethic. And if you can work for it, you can do it. And so that's what I share with people who look like me, whether it's young, whether it's African-American, whether it's, first or second person to go to college in their family. Those are the things like work hard. Whatever you're in, work hard. Don't expect people to give you anything, and then don't take it personal. A lot of times it doesn't have anything to do with you. You have to make sure, one, if your heart is in it, it's legal and it's ethical, you do it. So I embrace a lot, but I will stand in the gap for those individuals and say, I get it. I understand what it's like to be an African-American male. I get it. I understand for those individuals who did not have those people to speak on their behalf to get a position. So, but you know what? It's like playing, I love baseball, played baseball. It's like you've got to play the position, and you've got, sometimes if you want that position, you've got to beat the other person out to show them that you are worthy of it. And so that's the thing. Who plays the position the best?
I was in elementary school back in the 60s and 70s, and I can't remember if the struggle for the civil rights movement was taught much to me back then. I mean, that was 45, 50 years ago. How do you think the Black Lives Matter movement and the call for an end to racial injustice should be taught now to the students and will be taught in the next 5 to 10 years? Is this, in your mind, this generation's civil rights movement?
That's a hard question. It's big. I honestly, I think we should teach tolerance. I think we should start there, because it's too big to just embrace it right now, because not everyone gets it. And that's again, like I said, I don't want to be the spokesperson for.
Oh, I understand. I'm just as an educator, because
yeah, so
I literally can't remember if I was being taught at that time what the civil rights movement was happening, as it was
right.
happening. And
Yes.
I just don't know, as an educator, how do you think it should be taught in school now and then in the next 10 or 15 years?
So I think we have to first acknowledge the era. Then we have to acknowledge the era that we're in. Mm-hmm. The conversation that I often talk about is that, look how far we've come. We still have crossroads. We're still running in it. But the great part about this is that it's open for discussion.
Right.
That's where now that people are willing to discuss race and race matters, I think that is the biggest gap that we have now. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about those feelings. Let's talk about how I felt when, because then that increases, the tolerance. So we now are able to tolerate the conversation, because it used to be taboo. And it's like, oh, I don't want, that'll hurt his feelings, that'll hurt her feelings. What I always, I have friends, and we talk about it, and we're just open and candid about it. It's like, oh, well, I have Black friends. I was like, well, I have white friends. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. So just being tolerant about it first, I think, is having a tolerance and just talking candidly about it without emotion. Mm-hmm. And if we can do it without emotion, then we can hear one another. And then we start to move, and then there's an acceptance.
When Charles goes home and he loosens that tie that I see right there, and he turns off his phone, what does Charles and his wife and his 2 daughters, what do they like to do as a family? How do you get away?
So I love my family. Oh my gosh, love my family. So I'm very much a family guy. And what do we talk about? We talk about, future. We talk about education. We talk about college. We talk about vacationing. Well, before pandemic, we talked about vacation and where do we want to go and what do we want to do. We talk about careers for our daughters, and we do a lot of research on careers and talk about them. And so our goal is every year, every spring break, we would take our daughters on a college tour. And so we would visit a college, wherever we would go for vacationing during the spring break, we would go to a college. And so that was one of the things that we talk about. So we are very much into education, talking about education. And because we have girls, I shouldn't say because it almost sounds like it's a bad thing. We talk about having them being able to sit at the boardroom table. So it's almost like a go girls, a girls power. I'm outnumbered in the house, so I have to conform and say, okay, yes, what does it look like? So yeah, we talk about all of those good things and empowerment of young ladies and females. And we have a thing of where I talk with my girls, like, you cannot cry. You cannot be an emotional leader. I expect you to be a leader, but you cannot be an emotional leader. Don't cry unless it's an emotional thing where you're crying, but you can't get upset and cry because people will think a certain way of you. So if you're feeling that part, you go to the bathroom, you wipe your face, you get yourself together, and you come back, because I expect you to be able to sit at the table around, if you're the only female there, with a group of men who will give you the business, but you cannot cave in. And so it's kind of, tough training, but we have to start. But I want, we talk about success, and then we're doing, I'm doing pre-algebra with the 7th grader. We're talking about AP and French 3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing at home. And, we provide opportunities of some of the things that, growing up there, my parents showed love in a different way. But we do a lot of, I won't say positive praise, but, we'll dap them up, hands, fist, and that hugging and caring and that type of, but, how I was raised is different than I rear my daughters. Of course, my parents raised me like a boy. And so you have to take a lighter approach.
Do you want them to go into education for careers?
That's not what they want to do. That's not, they have one who goes back and forth with pharmacy, nurse practitioner, anesthetist, and then one who wants to be an attorney. So that's what we every time we go somewhere and we find someone who is an anesthetist or an anesthesiologist, we have them converse with them. Or if it's a nurse practitioner, if we're at CVS and they're doing, if they were having to do physicals or something, we would have them talk to the nurse practitioner and we have friends who are attorneys. So we provide that opportunity, and that's something that I want to be able to provide. And my wife and I are able to provide for our daughters, because my parents weren't able to say that in that vein of knowing those professions. That wasn't the crowd that they ran with.
Right.
And so just being able to give them that opportunity to hear it from that type of professional, it helps them decide, is that what they want? The only thing I've told them is that we're going to college. Yeah, we're going. If you don't go, I'll go back.
Well, you have challenges inside the classroom and outside the classroom in this school district. And judging by your record, it seems like you're prepared to handle both of them.
That is the goal. That is the goal. It's almost like stepping up to the plate. If we're going to go with the baseball, the pitcher is going to pitch. It may be an insider, it may be out, it may touch, but you've got to be ready as a batter. And so I see New Hanover County Schools as we're the batter, and however it's thrown to us, we're going after it. And so we're skilled at it. We'll take our time, and we're going to listen. And that's the biggest thing. In order to instill trust, we've got to listen and then give a response. Well,
Dr. Charles Foust, you have a district of a lot of children and a lot of families to lead in the near future. I appreciate you taking the time, and it's good to get to know you personally as well as professionally, because you're going to be a leader in this community for a long time. Thanks for joining us today on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
A big thank you to Dr. Charles Foust for sparing some of his valuable time and joining us for this week's podcast interview. He has his own page on the New Hanover County Schools website. You could also find a little bit more about his career on his LinkedIn page. He's also on Twitter and Facebook as well. Now, before we go, I'd like to ask you a favor. Please download and subscribe to the One-on-One with John Evans podcast on whatever app you use to listen to your favorite shows. And if you would be so kind, please consider leaving us a rating or a review. The more feedback we get from people like you, the higher we'll be listed on all the apps, and the better chance we'll have of bringing in even more new listeners. I'm John Evans. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's episode of One-on-One. Stay safe.